Hey, what's up, Grapevine? We are going to start our talk on carbohydrates. I'll kind of give people a few minutes to log on here if they want, or a minute or two to log on while we're just kind of rolling through this. I wanted to do it a little bit earlier today because I feel like I can just give a little bit more of my energy. 7:30 p.m. at night is it's a little late for me to be really bringing it. So I'm a little bit sharper this early. I apologize. I thought the kid would be asleep by now, but he, you may hear him in and out. He's over here eating breakfast, which has got some protein, fats, and carbs in it. But part two of our nutrition talk, building off of last week. Last week we talked about protein. This week we're talking about carbohydrates, what they are, why they're important, how to utilize them, what kinds, things like that. I want to start by saying if you're logged on here and you want to ask any questions, feel free to fire away. I'll see them over here in the comments, so try to get to those as we roll through it. Want to start about the demonization of carbs and fats, for that matter. Since we're not talking about fats today, we'll go ahead and roll into carbs. They are important for everyone. Everybody needs carbs in some way, shape, or form. There are some side notes to that, which I'll get into later on in the discussion, but it is your body's main source of energy, especially when you're involved in high intensity exercise like CrossFit. The process, let's say you eat some carbohydrate, your body breaks down the glucose from the carbohydrate, it gets into your bloodstream, you use insulin to store that carbohydrate, and then now it's called what's called glycogen, which is what your body pulls from when you're exercising at high intensities. High intensity is a relative term. Just know that something like CrossFit or interval training, weightlifting is all considered high intensity exercise. So it kind of just right there would say, hey, if I'm not able to pull from these stores of glycogen in my muscles for energy, what am I going to use? So just know that everybody needs carbohydrates. Types. So types of carbohydrates, we have starches that come from plant sources. You have vegetables, fruits, root vegetables, things like that, which can be further broken down into simple and complex carbohydrates. Your simple carbohydrates are going to be the fast-acting, quick-digesting carbs that are like your refined sugars, breads, pastas, cereals, things of that nature. We have our complex carbohydrates, which are slower digesting, tend to have more fiber, which helps slow down the digestion, which is going to be our vegetables and fruits and kind of starchy root vegetables, things like that. The body's, we intake these carbs, and again, it's your body's favorite kind of fuel to use unless you're fat adapted. Let's think like a ketogenic diet. So unless you're really focusing on really limiting your carbs, maybe in a different state and not able to, or not necessarily using that energy efficiently. But if you're not in that state, your body's going to require carbohydrates. It's all sorts of energy, your brain fuel, body fuel, things like that. If you're not eating enough carbs, you don't have those energy stores to pull from. So let's relate that to a workout. Let's say we come in, you haven't had much to eat. That's why some days you feel like you're really sluggish in the gym, or just hit a wall. There's a particular term called bonking, which is when you're training really hard, you don't have enough energy stores to pull from, and you just kind of feel like you stop. Your body doesn't want to go on. You don't want to move anymore. It's because you don't have the energy there. Hormonally, it's can be a huge issue. If you're limiting your carbs, you're probably limiting your calories, which can have other effects. But things like ladies, let's think like menstrual cycles, right? If you're having irregular menstrual cycles and things like that, especially if you're not using birth control or things to kind of control that, you might be in some sort of deficit with your calories that's non-beneficial, and adding some carbohydrates may be beneficial to your diet. There's some hormonal processes that are involved with that. So if you're not taking advantage of eating enough, you may see a swing. Okay. Again, so I'm trying to avoid the sciencey stuff here and just give a base of stuff. So if you want to dive into any more of that, we can get further discussions down the road. So how much is needed? There's definitely too much and there's definitely too little. It kind of just depends on your activity levels overall. Since I feel like everybody needs them in some way, shape, or form, whether you're fairly inactive all the way up to a high-level performer. It kind of just depends, and it's something you kind of have to play around with. As a guideline, unlike protein, which we discussed has a guideline of about, like a gram per pound of body weight, that's probably a pretty good starting point for most people, which, what's a gram, right? If you can read some of the packages, you'll see what a serving size is, and you can figure that out on your own, or we can use the hand measuring method like we did with protein. If you recall, protein had palm method, carbs will have a cupped hand method, or I like to use a cupped hand. You can even use the fist method on carbs. If if you're fairly deficient in them overall, starting out, you're gonna kind of want to ramp this up. Only because if your body's not adapted well to really utilizing carbs, if you start throwing a bunch at it, it may have some issues in it. You may have some water weight issues, some storage issues, because your body may not be used to really utilizing the carb to its biggest potential. So, starting points. I would say for most active males, anywhere from 3 to 5 fists and or cupped hands per day. You can kind of see what that measures out to on your own. For ladies, I would say probably about the same. Other than body weight differences and height differences, calorie needs and requirements don't differ much between males and females. Specifically females, you may see some increases in your athletic potential if you start pounding more carbohydrates and get away from not eating enough. I see that a lot in females, and females, ladies, I'm not picking on you. It's just what I've noticed. I think there's an issue that we need to address in this manner about the under eating. And on a side note of that, I think I can't recall the age, it's a child, child requires like 1,200 calories a day, right? And if you're eating 1,200 calories right now and you are not a child and you're involved in CrossFit and coming into the gym working out multiple times a week, we need to have a longer talk about this. So just know that you have a lot of calories to play with. If you're wanting to count calories, I think a good baseline for most ladies is going to be, like, for working out at a minimum 2,200, and that's just kind of depending again on how much you work out. So again, this really applies to active lifestyles, high intensity exercise. So let's talk about the people where I would like to throw in a little caveat to carbohydrate. Daniel Barry had a question: how can you drop 5 pounds fast? I'll address that really quick. Let me finish my side note here and we'll cover that. If you are type 1 diabetic, type 2 diabetic, overall sedentary in your lifestyle, overweight, and that's a varying degree of being overweight, probably anywhere from, let's say, 50 to 50 plus pounds, your overall needs are not going to be as much. Again, the further away from that lower number you get, probably initially the less need for carbohydrates you're gonna need overall. Cancer, people with cancer, people with neurological kind of brain issues would do better to eat like more of fat adapted diet or a lower carb, higher protein, higher fat diet, moderate protein, higher fat diet. All those you can kind of throw in together. The reason for the diabetics is they don't use insulin very well unless they're injecting. Type 2 just have insulin sensitivity problems where they don't utilize their own produced insulin as well. And so that being the case, if insulin is not there to grab that blood sugar, the glucose that's floating through your bloodstream, may not be beneficial for you. It actually causes more health problems down the road. So just know that those kind of people, or people with those issues, may not need as much carbohydrate. How can I lose 5 pounds fast? So I'll jump forward to something that is part of adding in more carbs to your diet, especially if you're coming from a lower carb diet. Carbs tend to add, or your body tends to hold on to water when you start eating more carbohydrate. There's something, I think it's like 1 gram of, for every 1 gram of carb, there is 3-ish grams, give or take, of water retained in your body. Your kidneys like to hold on to sodium when the carbohydrate comes up, or your intake comes up, and your body's response to that is to try to hold on to more water. So let's reverse that process. If you are eating a typical American diet right now, which is usually too many refined carbs, not enough protein, probably a lot more fat than you need. If you were to just focus on maybe implementing a lower carb diet, you're going to see that water weight drop really quick. This is why when you start a paleo diet or you start a ketogenic diet, that first 2 weeks, you see about a 5 to 7 pound shift in your weight really fast. And then it kind of tapers off and you don't see that weight shift anymore. Daniel, that's a really good way to lose 5 pounds fast. Just go low carb for probably 2 weeks consistently, not 5 days and then gorge yourself on the weekends. But if you can do that about 5 days consistently, you're going to drop about 5 pounds. If you notice it visibly, that's the question. You may, your pants may fit a little bit better, and things like that. It may not be super noticeable, but a good way to drop 5 pounds nonetheless. So that being the case, guys, just know if you start adding more carbs into your diet, you're probably going to see a little bit of weight gain. It's not fat. You're not gaining weight from eating more carbs, and that's one of the issues people have with eating more carbs, especially right out of the gate. It's just your body holding on to water. It also helps kind of insulate the muscles a little bit better. You know, let's think about jerky, beef jerky versus a fresh cut of meat, right, that has a whole bunch of water in before you throw it on the grill. Think about how pliable and elastic that piece of meat is before you throw it onto the grill or bake it or whatever. Now take a piece of jerky that doesn't have any water in it, all dried out, and think about what it looks like when you pull it apart. You'll see lots more muscle cramps, muscle tears, muscle injuries, things like that on probably lower carb diets or deficient in carbs, which also adds into the recovery aspect of carbohydrates. If you are feeling like you're run down during the week, especially if you have the weekends off, you come in on a Monday and you're feeling great. Tuesday, you're like, well, I'm all right. Wednesday, you're like, man, I'm already beat down. You're probably not eating enough in general. Good time to throw it in. Time to add some carbs to your diet. If your sleeping is off, we could probably attribute it to that as well. That's part of the recovery aspect. So let's talk about adding it in, I guess. If there's two ways to go about this. Like I said, you have this standard American diet, which probably is a little bit higher in sugar. If we convert those type of carbs from simple sugars over to more complex stuff, eating vegetables and fruits, even if it's the same amount, you're going to see some weight fluctuations. You'll probably see some water shifts. And if you just stick with that for a little while, things will level out and you'll probably start shifting some weight around. But I think if you're coming from more like a lower carb diet, which we see a lot in CrossFit, you know, usually the quickest diet that gets attached to is a lower carb diet. Think keto, because it's very effective. But when you start adding in intense exercise on top of that, it really becomes fairly non-effective. And then you just stop losing weight and things like that. So we start adding in those carbs. I think the best way to do that is taking some and putting them in or around your workout to start. So keep it fairly lower throughout the day. And then if let's say you work out in the afternoon, like I normally work out at 3, before I came in an hour to 2 hours before the workout, let's add in a good dose of carbohydrate, which for most people to start would probably be like that fist or cupped hand, maybe 2. And then when we go home, let's have another one, preferably, you know, dinner or something like that, or a meal probably an hour after you work out of the same amount, 1 cupped hand or 1 fist of carbs. And then the rest of the day, you can kind of play with it. See how your energy levels are in terms of numbers. That I think 30 grams to 50 grams of carbohydrates you could probably play around with. I know that if you're not used to eating a lot of carb and you may have, like, you introduce it outside of a workout time like breakfast or lunch, and you don't really eat a lot of them in general, and you have a good dose like 50 plus grams of carbohydrates, then you'll probably notice a quick spike in your blood sugar, and then it starts coming down, and then you start getting tired. And that's when you have like a big breakfast or something full of pancakes, and you know, like an hour to an hour and a half later, you feel like you can take a nap. That's that blood sugar coming down. So just like getting into exercise, you want to ramp this up over time. I know that's fairly vague. I'd like to be more specific, but it really is dependent on the person and where they're coming from in their current diet. So again, if you want to talk more about that, just reach out to me, Brandon@Grapevine-CrossFit.com, or in the gym to discuss a little bit more about what your situation is going on, and we can figure that out for you. Lastly, sorry, I'm just checking my notes here. Lastly is it's fairly simple to kind of overeat calories, I think, or carbohydrates, especially in their refined form, thinking pastas and breads and things like that. So you don't need a whole lot. You think a bowl of pasta, right? And that's generally about, in our hand-sized servings, like a cupped hand of pasta is not very much. It's all you need, and it generally is more carbohydrates than, say, like a cupped hand of potatoes. But just know with those more refined stuff, those processed things like pastas, cereals, and breads, that you may have to pull back a little bit on the serving sizes. And then that leads us kind of into the last little part here I want to talk about, which is fruit. Fruit gets a really bad rap. If anybody ever tells you to not eat fruit, you should probably just walk away from that person. That being said, you shouldn't be eating fruit all the time. It shouldn't be your main staple of your diet. It is a carb. It has carb properties. It has fructose, has a little bit of glucose, mostly fructose. So let's talk about what happens when you ingest fructose. It's probably not the best idea to be eating a bunch of fruit around your workout. It may work for some people, but generally the process for breaking down fructose is a little different than breaking down glucose. Your body, your muscles don't use fructose like it does glucose. Your liver likes fructose. So it'll absorb that fructose, and there is a cap. Let's just imagine a cup, right? And that cup is being filled up with fructose. You ate a piece of fruit. Here it comes, here it comes. Here, I got a cup right here. What happens when you get to the top of this cup? It starts spilling over. Your body can convert some of that into glucose. It's not very efficient, so it tends to, if it can't go into certain other areas of your body, like into your brain or into your muscles, it's going to be stored as fat. That's why if you're on a maintenance kind of calorie program or an above maintenance calorie, it would be beneficial to not be pounding a bunch of fruit. That being said, if you're trying to lose weight, eat fruit, because fruit, I mean, it's not going to make you fat overall unless you're eating it all the time. So just try to limit that, because you're already in a calorie deficit. You're going to be losing weight. Just limit your fruit intake so that you're not being counterproductive to the caloric deficit, if that makes sense. So I guess to sum it all up, yes, you do need carbs. I don't care what the situation is, especially if you see me on a daily basis, if you come into the gym, have some carbohydrate. Again, I'd love to talk to you about how much or how we can ramp that up again, or maybe what the best situation is for you. But just eat the friggin' carbs, man. They're good for you. Hormonally, they're good for you. They'll help you recover in your workout. They'll help you sleep better. If you start getting all this other stuff in alignment simply by making a little shift in your diet, it's going to go across all these fingers, right? As for amounts, it varies. Something you can play around with. Know that there will probably be a little bit of water retention, maybe some weight. If you introduce this, don't be afraid of it. I would give yourself, about 5 to 7 pounds fluctuations in a given week. So let's say one day you're up 5 pounds, the next day you're down 3. Like, give it some variance. Introduce them slowly. If you don't eat them a lot, ramp them up over time. Produce them around your workout, or ingest them around your workout to start, and then start branching away from that workout into your normal meals over time. Over time kind of means whatever. If you're feeling great around your workouts, maybe try introducing a little bit more, or let's spread some across the day. If you're not feeling great in your workouts, if you eat some and you're feeling tired, you probably need to pull it down a little bit and introduce some more during or after your workout. This is a lot more in depth intensive than just saying, hey, eat more protein like we did last week. I think for most people, one thing I do want to cover, and I know I'm going all over the place here, let's talk supplements really quick. Supplementation of carbohydrate. You have things like Gatorade, powdered carbs to add into your protein. Those are generally the two, you know, they're liquid supplementation. I would say, you know, there's some stuff shown that it's not really necessary to intake that stuff around your workouts anymore. There's no like real anabolic window for growth. I think that's a yes and no for most people. I think a meal of protein, balanced protein, fats, and a good dose of carbs after a workout will probably be beneficial. I will say try to get that within at least 2 hours after you work out, because you'll just feel better. And that's the purpose behind the supplementation of the carb, because you can get it in right after you work out. Like for me, man, the last thing I want to do when I've just pounded a really hard conditioning workout is eat a bunch of food. It's not really ideal for me. Sometimes we have to coach classes, got to take care of the kid or whatever, and it may not be ideal to sit down and eat a meal within that time frame. So this is where supplementation can come in handy, especially during workout. If you're working out more than, let's say, 2 hours a day, or with more than an hour a day, it may be beneficial for you to have a little bit of liquid carb like a Gatorade, or in the gym we have the Kill Cliff sports drink, or some powdered carbohydrate that you can mix into water to help get you through the rest of that time. So again, something to play around with. Try it out, see what you think. I'll wrap it up here because we're not running long. I just want to keep people entertained. So if you have any questions about any of this, I would love to talk to you more about it. You can drop some comments later on, whatever. And let's get you moving in the right direction, especially if you've been feeling run down, or you're hitting those walls in the gym, or you're not sleeping well, things of that nature. So eat your carbs, enjoy them. Next week, we're going to talk about fats, which will be probably the same kind of deal here, a little bit longer, because we can have some fun with that. So fats next week. In the meantime, shoot me any questions you may have, and we will see you next time. Thanks for everybody who joined in.